Medical professionals recognize first do no harm as the first principle of medicine. Yet between 100 and 200 times a year in America, pediatric surgeons do harm when they surgically correct the ambiguous genitalia of intersex infants. These surgeries, which I call genital normalizing surgeries, are unjustifiably performed on an emergency basis and supported only by questionable science. What are the differences between sex, sexuality, and gender? Intersex is a general term used for a variety of conditions in which a person is born with a reproductive or sexual anatomy which doesn't seem to fit the typical definitions of male or female. Sex refers to the biological and physiological characteristics that define men and women. Traditionally, male sex is categorized by the presence of a penis, testes, and an XY chromosome, while female sex corresponds to the presence of a vagina, ovaries, and an XX sex chromosome. Gender refers to socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a given society considers appropriate for men and women. Gender identity refers to a person's innate, deeply felt physiological identification as a man, woman, or some other gender which may or may not correspond to the sex assigned to them at birth. Gender expression refers to all of the external characteristics and behaviors that are socially defined as either masculine or feminine, such as dress, grooming, mannerisms, speech patterns, and social interactions. What is the history of the conflict? Prior to the late 1800s, sexual abnormalities were not commonly addressed and were cultural taboos. In instances of severe genital ambiguity, however, when an individual's abnormalities had to be addressed, midwives or local elders determined the child's gender. The 1900s, however, saw increased awareness of sexual differences and the establishment of an arbitrary standard. This standard resulted in two very distinct sexual categories in which the vast array of genital differences was not justly represented. Instead, an intersex child was considered either completely male or completely female. Furthermore, during the 1950s, Johns Hopkins University established a method which advocated that each child's potential for a normal gender identity should be maximized by making each child's body, upbringing, and mind align as much as possible after genital reconstruction. This approach was centered upon honesty and psychological support. But in actuality, many patients of intersex surgery were deceived and did not receive such psychological support. Around this time, John Money's theory that nurture was more important than nature in regards to rearing a child who had undergone intersex surgery rose in popularity. The widespread acceptance of this theory resulted in the popular notions that gender and gender norms were social constructions. As the physical and psychological effects of genital reconstruction negatively affected increasing numbers of intersex people, advocates began to take measures in order to protect their well-being and rights. Have there been any laws created specifically with intersex children in mind? On November 1, 2013, Germany put a law into place that established a third gender for intersex newborn babies. This was enacted to avoid confining a child to one gender at birth. Later in life, the intersex person can choose a gender or opt to remain classified as intersex. India, Pakistan, and Australia have similar laws. Have there been any cases where surgery on intersex children has been ruled unethical? In October 1999, Colombia ruled that parents do not have the unrestricted rights to give consent for genital surgeries performed on their intersex children. This restricts what can be done to children too young to give informed consent themselves. This law also declared intersex people as a protected minority group. There is no corresponding or similar law in the United States. Can doctors be held liable for how they treat children with intersex conditions? In the summer 2000 issue of the Michigan Journal of Law, there is a discussion about the legal liability of doctors who treat intersex children. Authors argue that because surgery is the accepted standard for intersex children in the United States, the court will likely not hold doctors liable for harm. However, doctors are often held accountable for failure to obtain informed consent considering many parents of intersex children are misinformed about their child's condition.
What is the methodology behind the diagnosis and treatment of intersex infants? The diagnosis of intersex conditions is based on ambiguous genitalia as seen at birth and the size, shape, and other characteristics of the visible organ. Some conditions are more easily distinguished and classified than others due to the existence of several different ambiguous genitalia conditions such as aphalia, clitomelagia, and hypospadias. About half a century ago, John Hopkins sexologist John Money set the standard model of treatment for intersex infants based on two main ideas. Money believed that infants are psychosexually neutral at birth, so therefore, if an intersex infant is surgically altered to be one sex before 2 years of age, the infant has the capability to conform to that gender. He also believed that in order for an infant to have a healthy psychosexual development, it is necessary for the infant to have what is deemed normal-looking genitalia. Based on the idea that it is easier to take away than to build, most infants are almost always assigned to be female due to the fact that it is the easier gender to construct in surgery regardless of their genetic makeup. In the John Joan case, David Reimer, or John for privacy concerns, suffered severe burns during circumcision. His parents turned to Money for advice, which was that John undergo surgery to be reassigned as a girl. The belief behind this was that if John lived as a man without proper genitalia, he would be unable to marry or have healthy heterosexual relationships and would feel incomplete and lonely in life. After surgery, Money sent John home to live as a girl, Joan. After following Joan's progress, Money concluded that the reassignment was successful and claimed that nurture, not nature, defines the gender identity of a person, and that if surgery is performed early, an infant can be altered to live as either male or female. In 1994, Milton Diamond interviewed John about his life as Joan. It was reported that John, who was then in his 30s, was living as a man and married to a woman. John claimed that he quickly rejected his newly assigned sex and faced traumatic childhood experiences due to his lack of sense of belonging as a girl. By age 14, Joan learned about her surgery and chose to become John again. John Money's theories were solely based on his claimed success of this case. But after David Reimer came forward and told how his case was not actually a success, his theory is still merely a hypothesis. What are the impacts of genital reconstruction? One of the most frustrating aspects of genital reconstruction are the impacts it has in the future. The procedure damages orgasmic tissue and nerves, resulting in lessened sensation and interference with genital functions. The procedure can also lead to chronic pain and create scar tissue, both of which impair sexual performance and ability. The process of genital reconstruction also leaves lasting emotional scars. The process is usually a series of 3 to 5 surgeries, along with countless doctor visits and hospital stays. According to Anne Tamar Mattis's article, Exceptions to the Rule, quote, some intersex adults report that much of their childhood vacation time was spent in hospitals, aware that something unspeakable was wrong with their genitals, but not knowing what it was. One intersex adult recalls a childhood of horrible, tense visits to the pediatric endocrinologist, to have his genitals gawked, fondled, and stared at by hordes of what he perceived to be nasty, despicable men. Many intersex people and some professionals compare the traumatic effects of the concealment model to the effects of childhood sexual abuse, unquote. Genital reconstructive surgery for intersex children is a ludicrous solution to a non-existent problem. Many argue that it is the responsibility of the physician to normalize the child in order to protect them from future confusion and emotional torment. It has been shown, however, that genital reconstructive surgery performed at birth is overall detrimental to the child's future well-being and emotional health. The procedure is still technically an experimental one and rarely accomplishes its purpose in normalizing the appearance of genitals or preventing confusion or shame. For all of the adult intersex people that have gone through genital reconstruction as a child, none of them have come out in favor of the procedure, where countless have come out in condemning it. Performing the surgery at birth robs the individual of the right to consent to physical alteration and the opportunity to define for themselves their own gender identity in relation to their natural physical sex. The procedure also fails to take into account the possibility that the child may come to reject their assigned physical sex and ignores the existence of a gender spectrum in favor of the rigid gender binary. In summary, Genital reconstructive surgery is an unethical approach to treating a disease that does not exist. It is a cowardly and unethical attempt to trap everyone into either a male or female identity.